How often do you internalize and think about what other people think about you? Does it affect your behavior? Take, for example, singing. So, what do you think other people think about how you sing? Have you ever sang in front of other people? Do you do it often? What do you think they're thinking when you sing in front of them? Do they tell you something? Do they say, "Oh, yeah, you're a great singer"? Or do they stare at you with crazy faces? So I remember whenever I was a teenager, I used to put on my headset and I would be jamming out to Mariah Carey. And I completely believed I had the singing voice of Mariah Carey. Little did I know, I cannot carry a tune. I am totally tone deaf. But I would have probably kept singing and tried out for American Idol one day if it had not been for somebody telling me, "You can't sing." So, it made me start thinking and deciding I was gonna have a change of careers. So, what other norms have you learned? What other behavior patterns have you learned based on what other people have said to you or the reactions you see based on how you behave? So let's think about dating, for example. What are the norms in dating? What are the gender roles in dating? Is this a gender role expectation in postmodern society? Is it the man paying for the dinner date, especially the first date? Or is it something else? Is it the expectation of the woman to pay? Have gender roles changed over time? What are those norms and values that we think about when going on a first date, second date, third date? Are there specific rules about how we should behave? And what has changed in society today that's different from before, pre industrial society? Was it different back then compared to the way it is today? When you think about socialization, you want to think about all areas of how you have learned to behave. So, what are the norms, the things that you normally follow, the things that you do on a daily basis? What are the things that you value most in society? What are those things and how are they taught to us? How do we learn our behavior, our attitudes, how we perceive things, what skills that we have, and our culture? So, socialization pretty much sums up all of that. And so you can see in the photos here, all of these images are from birth until old age, until death and dying. So, pretty much socialization affects and impacts everybody from birth to death. It's a lifelong process. One of my favorite movies that really depicts socialization well is the movie The Truman Show. So, if you've never seen The Truman Show, I highly recommend that you watch this movie. In The Truman Show, he's basically watched throughout his entire life. Society watches him. And in this process, he's learning the social rules of his society. And as you can see in this image, there's a picture of a plane with a lightning bolt going through it saying it could happen to you. In our society, there are messages all around us. We walk through them, we see them, they're everywhere. So in the movie the Truman Show, you can see in this picture can happen to you. So what message is that? What are they trying to tell Truman? Basically, and this is at a travel agency that he's at, by the way. So they don't want him to leave. Okay, so looking at this picture, you can see they don't want him to leave. They don't want him to take a flight anywhere. One of the lines that I like the most from this movie is, "We accept the reality of the world in which we are presented." And I think that really tells a good example, or it's a good statement that basically reflects what socialization is. So these messages, where do they come from? In sociology, we call them the agents of socialization. So they start in the very first one. You can see in the cartoon images, the first one is family. That is the most important, that is integral. What you learn from your family basically shapes and sets you up for the rest of your life. Your family is super, super important. Then you have school. What do you learn in school? You learn manners and rules and norms of how to behave in groups. Then you also meet these friendships. You have friends and peer groups that shape your beliefs and your identity and the values and norms that you have for how you're going to live. You may act totally different at home compared to the way you act at school because now you're being shaped by your peer groups as you get older. You also have religion. You have your belief systems that can shape you. And then not only that, you have mass media and social media. So, mass media is all of that media that's one sided. You hear it on the news, the TV, newspapers, anything that shoots out that's one sided. But then now today, we also have social media where it's two sided. You can actually have your input and not only listen, but you can become a social creator yourself. So, how do we get these messages? That's through transmission. And so that is given to you through all of these agents in one way or another. And so I'm going to go over some of the theories of agents of socialization next. So our first theory that I want to go over is through George Herbert Mead. He came up with this theory in 1913. It's called the three-stage process to develop the self in society. He believed that the self is not something that is given to us, but it's something that we actively create through social interactions. You can see in the first image here, you have a little boy that's dressed just like his father. That's the imitation stage. Little kids, they do this all the time. They're like, look what I can do. And they start dancing around, they start behaving certain ways, they start looking at their parent and they start imitating what their parent does. And so through that process, they learn to start identifying who they are, their self. The second stage is the play stage. And this stage, they start to take what they've learned and what they've imitated, and they start to play with toys. They start to imitate and play with the things that their parents do. So, in this second picture, what do you think his parents' job is? He is playing with something that maybe he has seen or knows that his parent plays with. The same thing with teachers' kids. You know, a teacher's kid might see a parent grading papers. So then what do they want to do? They want to start playing with papers and grading papers or playing school. So a lot of kids will start to play with some of the similar things that their parents interact with. Then you move into the game stage. So the game stage is where you learn those social skills and social rules of playing with other children. And in this process, you learn to be social with others. So the three-stage process allows an individual to develop their generalized self. This is where they understand their self in relation to society. They know where their place is. They've developed their me and their I. So the I is more of the spontaneous person, but the me is their socialized version. So now they've become a part of society through this three-stage process and learning who they are, their own self in society. The second theorist of socialization is Charles Horton Cooley. So his theory was also in the early 1900s. This one was in 1902. His theory was called the looking glass self. And so one of his quotes is kind of confusing. So wrap your brain around this. It is, I am not what I think I am. I am not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am. It sounds a little confusing. And again, the title is Looking Glass Self. So it's basically what you think other people think about you. It's not what they actually think about you, but it's just what you think other people think about you. Now, some people are totally off on their looking glass self. They might think that other people think they're this comedian, this amazing person, and they really believe that. Or they could believe that other people think they're this horrible person. And that's not at all what other people think about them. So sometimes it aligns, but sometimes it doesn't. Basically, what he says is that we develop who we are based on how we feel other people think about us. So it's a pretty interesting concept to kind of wrap your brain around, but it's the second major theory of socialization and how we actually develop ourself and how we relate to society. Beyond the explicit lessons, the things that we learn from our parents, from our peer groups, everything that we learn basically that's explicit. What do you think about the subtle influences that we might learn at school, at work, and our social circles on how we become the person that we are? So, there is an underlying thing called the hidden curriculum. It's all of those things that are subtle in our lives and we may not even catch it. Maybe, at some point in your life, somebody says something or you hear something or you see something, and it really does impact your life and change it. So here's a scene from the Truman Show about some of the hidden curriculum they were trying to implement into Truman.
Truman grew up. We were forced to manufacture ways to keep him on the island.
I'd like to be an explorer, like the Great Magellan.
Oh, you're too late. There's really nothing left to explore.
So you can see from this scene, they are trying their best to socialize him so that he stays on this island. So even that comment that, well, why would you want that career? I remember my dad told me when he was in high school, he was really interested in becoming a doctor. And so he told his teacher that that's what he wanted to do. And he had a teacher tell him, you know what, Russell? Being a doctor is going to take a long time. You're going to be in school for years. So, based on what that teacher told my dad, he decided he wasn't going to become a doctor. So, the little things that you hear, the little subtle influences that we receive in our life can change and alter the course of our life forever. So, where are we at today? Why do you think Greg Perry created this cartoon? What is he trying to say about humanity? Are we evolving backwards? What do you think? I hope you enjoyed learning about socialization. So, at this point, I want you guys to have a discussion with each other based on critical thinking questions that you come up with. So, number one, make sure you create a as good as possible. I mean, I want you to dig deep and think of a critical thinking question. Think about how socialization impacts your life. Think about maybe opposites of socialization and what that could look like. Create a critical thinking question that could spark a discussion amongst your classmates. After you create the question and post it, I want you to find two questions from different classmates and then thoughtfully respond to each one with at least 100 words. Thank you for tuning in to Miss Richardson's lecture. I hope you guys have an amazing week. Thanks so much.